Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into the shadows, into the cold, eerie world of medieval assassins. Picture this. You're walking through a dark alley, the only light coming from flickering torchlight casting strange, long shadows against stone walls. The air is thick with tension, and you can feel eyes watching your every move. Every footstep could lead you to your death, or worse, thrust you into a world where you become an assassin, someone trained in the art of killing, deception, and survival. The looming threat of becoming an assassin in such a world isn't as far-fetched as you think. It's not about the thrill of the kill. It's about surviving in a world that's so brutal, where your own life means nothing if you don't have the right skills. It's a world of constant fear, where every decision, every action, could seal your fate. Now, imagine living in a time when death was around every corner. A simple mistake, a slip-up, or even just being in the wrong place at the wrong time could cost you everything. You probably won't survive this, but hey, let's not dwell on that right now. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Where are you tuning in from tonight? Post your location and local time, and let's share this moment together. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. In the medieval world, you're not just fighting against the cold or the elements. You're fighting to survive. Life is fragile, and power is everything. The tools of survival skill, cunning, and the willingness to do whatever it takes to survive in a world where trust is scarce and betrayal is common. Being an assassin is not glamorous. It's a way of life, a job, and one that brings you face to face with the deepest, darkest parts of humanity. So, let's take a closer look at what it really meant to live as an assassin during these dark times. As you step deeper into this world, let's take a closer look at what it truly meant to be an assassin in medieval times. Picture yourself not as a simple killer, but as a secretive agent, trained for espionage, sabotage, and spreading fear. Assassins were far more than just hired hands to eliminate rivals. They were the silent instruments of power, used by those who could afford their services. Your role wasn't just about killing. It was about infiltrating enemy territories, gathering intelligence, and ensuring that political shifts went in favor of those who hired you. The assassin's job was a dangerous game of manipulation, involving layers of secrecy and deceit. The fear you struck into the hearts of your targets was as important as the act itself. People never knew when or where you'd strike, which made your presence even more terrifying. Historians still debate whether assassins were truly mercenaries, hired for any cause, or if they were part of more organized, covert political structures. Some argue that they were driven by ideals, taking down tyrants or opposing unjust rulers. Others say that they were purely tools of the powerful, with no moral compass, only loyalty to the gold they were paid with. What's clear, however, is that being an assassin wasn't a matter of personal choice for many. It was a survival tactic. In a society where the lines between hero and villain were often blurry, you could end up an assassin simply because you had the skill to be one, and because the cost of failing to do your job was often more horrific than the act of killing itself. You would have been trained in a range of deadly arts: poisons, stealth, manipulation, and knife work. Your every movement would be calculated, your emotions suppressed. You would need a mind as sharp as the blade you carried, and a willingness to adapt to any situation. Killing was an art form, but so was the ability to slip into the shadows unnoticed, to observe from a distance without being seen. It was a life filled with constant tension, where trust was in short supply, and every person you met might one day become a potential target, or worse, your next rival. It wasn't just about survival. It was about staying one step ahead, keeping your identity hidden, and knowing when to strike or when to retreat into the dark. The assassin's world wasn't a glamorous one, but it was the only one you had if you wanted to make it in the brutal, unforgiving landscape of medieval politics. Now, imagine the consequences of failure. You've been trained for months, maybe even years, in the deadly arts. You know how to use your weapons, whether it's a dagger, poison, or a simple rope. But the reality of an assassin's life isn't just about executing the job. It's about ensuring that the job is done without fail. The consequences of messing up aren't just about your reputation, they're about your life. Failure as an assassin meant death, but not just the quick death of an executioner's blade. No, your failure would be a public spectacle, meant to serve as a warning to others who might think of betraying their masters or stepping outside the lines. Imagine the terror as you're caught. The betrayal is not just to your employer, but to the very system that keeps you alive. You could be dragged through the streets, your punishment both physical and psychological. The medieval world had its own methods of dealing with traitors and failed assassins. You could be hanged in the town square, your body left on display for days as a stark reminder of what happens when you fail. And if you were particularly unlucky, your death would be slow, filled with torture meant to break your spirit. Historians still argue whether these public executions were effective deterrents for the other assassins, or whether they simply fueled the growing paranoia that permeated through every shadowy corner of society. Some believe these executions reinforced the importance of loyalty to the guilds and the powerful families who employed these killers. Others argue that it was the very public nature of these punishments that made the world of the assassin even more terrifying. When the power of fear is used against you, there's no room for mercy. The psychological toll was just as powerful as the physical one. You lived with the constant fear that your failure might one day come for you in the most horrific way imaginable. So, the stakes were high. Failure wasn't just a loss of a paycheck. It was a loss of everything. Your survival depended on your ability to stay sharp, stay hidden, and avoid ever becoming the target. The fear of failure was a constant, gnawing presence, a reminder that one wrong move could end it all, but this fear was also what kept you alive. It made you better at what you did, sharpening your mind and your skills. Fear didn't just control you, it protected you from making fatal mistakes. Now, picture yourself as the assassin, caught between two worlds, neither fully hero nor villain, but a shadow figure who walks the line between both. In medieval times, the assassin's role was often deeply entangled with political intrigue. You weren't just an agent of death. You were a pawn, or sometimes a queen, in the larger game of power. The line between hero and villain was incredibly thin, and it could blur in an instant. One moment, you might be killing a tyrant, a man who has harmed countless innocents, and the next, you might be carrying out a job to eliminate a political rival for a more powerful, perhaps equally tyrannical, ruler. Historians still debate the morality of assassins in the Middle Ages. Were they heroes, ridding the world of corrupt rulers and nobles? Or were they nothing more than hired killers, tools used by the powerful to maintain their grip on society. Some argue that the medieval assassin had a duty to act in the name of justice. After all, many assassinations in medieval times were framed as acts of self-defense or moral necessity. Others suggest that most assassins were simply mercenaries who sold their skills to the highest bidder, without a care for the larger consequences of their actions. As an assassin, your sense of morality would often be tested. You were tasked with executing someone who might be beloved by the people, or at least perceived as a hero by others. How do you reconcile killing someone who may, in another time, have been seen as a just ruler? The guilt would weigh heavily on your conscience, but the job had to be done. The complexity of your role in the political world made every mission more than just a physical task. It was a mental battle, one that involved justifying your actions, or at least convincing yourself that you were working toward the greater good. In medieval politics, assassins were often seen as an inevitable part of the system, a necessity for maintaining control, particularly in times of chaos. But the reality was, you weren't just making a living. You were changing the course of history. Every assassination was a potential turning point, a small piece of the puzzle that could determine the fate of entire kingdoms or empires. However, you were just a cog in the machine, another nameless, faceless person carrying out orders. And in the end, you could never be sure if your actions would have the intended effect or just spiral into further violence and chaos. But it wasn't just about political maneuvering. As an assassin, you were part of a deadly network, bound by loyalty to your guild and the shadowy figures who employed you. In a world where trust was a commodity few could afford, loyalty was your only real asset. But that loyalty could also be your downfall. Trust. It's an odd thing in the world of assassins, isn't it? It's the one thing you desperately need. But it's the hardest thing to come by every day. You walk a fine line, always wondering who might be your ally and who might be your next betrayer. In a profession like yours, trust isn't something you give freely. It's earned. But even then, it's tenuous. As an assassin, your life is built on secrecy and lies. And every relationship you form could potentially be a trap. Your fellow assassins, the people who share your secrets, might one day become rivals, and your closest confidants could betray you for a better price or for power. Inside the assassins' guilds, secrecy was paramount. You couldn't afford to trust anyone outside your circle, and within that circle, loyalty was a fragile thing. Every assassin had their own motivations. Some were driven by money, others by a sense of duty, and a few, perhaps, by the thrill of the kill. But loyalty was tested in many ways, and one wrong step could put you on the chopping block. Even the slightest slip-up, a word out of place, an unguarded moment, could lead to your demise. Historians still argue whether these guilds were ultimately about the pursuit of personal gain or about achieving political aims. Were the guilds simply mercenary groups that offered their services to the highest bidder? Or were they something deeper? A network of shadowy figures controlling the fate of kingdoms. You learned to be suspicious of everyone, even the people closest to you. No matter how much you tried to trust your fellow assassins, the world around you was full of betrayal. The cold reality was that survival often depended on staying one step ahead of everyone else. When everyone is a potential threat, how do you form real bonds? How do you know who has your back and who's plotting your downfall? You didn't. Trust was always conditional. Loyalty was a currency, and it could be spent quickly and without remorse. The political intrigue that surrounded you only added to this web of paranoia. You weren't just performing assassinations for personal gain. You were doing it to maintain the balance of power. The rulers who hired you might have had their own motives, and they could just as easily turn on you once your usefulness had expired. You, the assassin, could be a pawn in their larger schemes. But you had no choice. You were trapped in the game, and your survival depended on your ability to outmaneuver those around you. In this world of secrecy, you were both a player and a victim, and despite the cold, calculating persona you had to adopt, there was always that lingering fear that one day the roles would reverse. Fear that someone would take the knife out of your hand and plant it in your back. Let's talk about the true power of an assassin. While many see the act of killing as the assassin's ultimate weapon, in reality, it's something far more insidious: fear. The greatest weapon in your arsenal isn't a dagger or poison. It's the ability to instill terror. When your name is whispered in hushed tones, when the mere thought of your presence sends shivers down spines, you've done your job better than any blade could. Fear isn't just about killing. It's about controlling the world around you without lifting a finger. The knowledge that you can strike at any time, that your target never knows when or where you'll come, is enough to paralyze even the most powerful individuals. Fear was your calling card. It was how you operated in the shadows, making people hesitant, second-guess every decision, and trust no one. Even the most feared leaders and warriors were susceptible to it. It wasn't just about striking down a king or a nobleman. It was about sending a message, about keeping your enemies off balance, never allowing them to sleep soundly at night. The fear of the unknown is a terrible thing, and you, as an assassin, embodied that fear. Historians still argue whether fear was more effective than actual violence in medieval times. Some say that the mere presence of an assassin could destabilize an entire region, leading to paranoia and distrust among even the most powerful. Others suggest that while fear played a role, it was the actual execution of assignments that truly shaped the course of events. Was the mere reputation of an assassin enough to disrupt society? Or did the physical act of killing have to follow through for power to truly shift? Either way, fear was one of your most powerful tools. But fear wasn't just about making others afraid. It was also about managing your own fear. The anxiety that would eat away at you as you prepared for each mission was real. Your life was always on the line, in a world where you couldn't trust anyone, not even your fellow assassins. You walked a razor-thin line every day. The fear of being discovered, of being betrayed, of failing your mission, or of suffering a painful, humiliating death in the town square. It weighed on you constantly. But that fear became a part of you, sharpening your focus and driving you to be better, faster, and more efficient. Every strike you made, every mission you completed, added to your growing reputation. But it also made you more of a target. The more successful you were, the more powerful you became, but the more dangerous your life became as well. The fear you created in others was mirrored in your own life. Every shadow, every flicker of movement could signal your own demise. But as long as you continued to succeed, the balance of power remained in your hands. Fear, both yours and theirs, kept you alive. Now, let's delve into the intricate world of the Assassin's Guilds. These organizations were far more than mere groups of hired killers. They were structured, secretive, and often bound by a strict code of conduct. Within the guild, you weren't just another murderer for hire. You were part of a larger, well-oiled machine, working towards a single goal: the preservation of the guild's power. Each assassin had their role, their purpose, but the ultimate success of the guild depended on everyone working in sync. Your life wasn't your own. You were part of something much bigger. But it wasn't all camaraderie and support. Like any organization, the guild was riddled with rivalries and power struggles. Loyalty to the guild was crucial, but loyalty to your fellow assassins was another matter. Rivalries within the guild could be just as deadly as the political conflicts you were hired to mediate. It was a constant struggle for power, and while assassination was your job, internal betrayal and the constant threat of assassination from within kept you on edge. One wrong step, one misplaced trust, and the very organization you swore your loyalty to could be the end of you. Historians still debate whether these guilds were purely political tools, or whether they evolved from earlier, more spiritual or religious origins. Some believe that the guilds were originally based on secretive religious orders, using assassination as a form of righteous vengeance. Others argue that these guilds were purely mercenary, born out of the need for organized crime syndicates during times of instability. What's undeniable is that once these guilds became powerful, they played a role in shaping the course of history. Assassins didn't just carry out their work, they often changed the fates of entire nations, depending on which side had the most power. Being a part of an assassin's guild wasn't just about the act of killing. It was about survival within a brutal, often hostile environment. You weren't just a killer, you were part of a network, one where loyalty and survival went hand in hand. But remember, even in this tightly knit structure, the fear of betrayal was constant. Who could you trust? Who might you have to eliminate to ensure your own safety within the guild? The rules were clear. Never show weakness. Never trust too easily. But even then, paranoia ran deep. Every mission you were sent on was more than a job. It was a test. The guild was constantly watching you, evaluating whether you were truly worthy of your position or whether you would be discarded in favor of a more capable assassin. The competition was fierce. It wasn't just about making it through the mission. It was about showing that you had what it took to survive in the cutthroat world of assassination. If you couldn't prove your value, you'd be replaced. As you spend more time in the world of assassins, you start to realize that it's not all about the act of killing. In fact, one of the most important aspects of your work is something that you don't do. It's about making sure that you aren't seen. Stealth becomes your most valuable tool. You learn to blend into the shadows, to disappear in plain sight, to move silently through crowded streets without drawing attention. An assassin's true power isn't always in the blade they carry. It's in their ability to be invisible, to act without leaving a trace, to strike when no one is looking. Historians often argue whether assassins were more effective because of their physical prowess or because of their skill in disappearing. Some suggest that being seen only in the moment of your strike makes you more terrifying. The mere thought that an assassin could be watching you, hidden just out of sight, makes the world a much scarier place. Others believe it was the physical act of murder that carried the real weight, not the ability to hide in the shadows. But regardless of how historians interpret the effectiveness of an assassin, one thing is clear: being unseen was as critical to your survival as any weapon. The art of camouflage was as much about observation as it was about movement. You didn't just hide. You learned how to blend into the very fabric of society. whether it was mimicking the walk of a common merchant, blending into a crowd of peasants, or hiding in plain sight by sitting in the back of a tavern. The key to an assassin's survival was not standing out. You trained your mind and your body to become part of the environment. Every action, every movement, was measured and calculated so that you could disappear when you needed to. But there was a cost. Living in the shadows, constantly hiding, takes a toll on you mentally. Imagine the constant paranoia, the fear that at any moment, someone could recognize you, or worse, that you could be discovered. The psychological strain of living a life where your face, your name, and your past are all hidden could be overwhelming. Every person you meet is a potential threat. Every ally could turn on you. This fear keeps you alert, but it also keeps you isolated, always looking over your shoulder, never able to truly relax. This fear, while it kept you alive, also trapped you in a world where you couldn't escape your own paranoia. Historians often debate whether this constant strain on assassins led to early burnout or mental instability. Some believe that living with such high levels of stress and secrecy led many assassins to lose their sense of self, becoming nothing more than tools for their guilds, their identities buried under layers of deceit. Others suggest that the assassin's ability to compartmentalize their life, separating their work from their personal identity, was what allowed them to thrive in such a dangerous profession. Either way, it's clear that being an assassin was never just a physical struggle. It was a mental and emotional one, too. You've probably noticed by now that as an assassin, your life was constantly teetering on the edge. Every job carried a risk, not just of death, but of being exposed. And when exposure came, whether by betrayal, mistake, or bad luck, the consequences were swift and brutal. There was no room for failure. Your work wasn't just about execution. It was about maintaining secrecy. And sometimes, the best way to eliminate an enemy wasn't by killing them, but by silencing them in a way that was far more permanent, erasing their name from history. Historians still debate how effective erasing someone's identity actually was in the medieval world. Some argue that the act of silencing someone, making sure they were forgotten by the world, was as powerful as any assassination. After all, in a time without social media or mass communication, to disappear was to be lost forever. If you could make sure no one remembered your target, no one would ever know they existed. No one would mourn them. No one would rally to their cause. It was as if they had never been. This power over identity gave assassins a unique weapon, the ability to extinguish a person's legacy, to make them vanish from the records of history itself. But the question remains, what did it feel like to kill someone and then erase their name? Was it just another part of the job? A cold, detached act like any other? Or was it something deeper? For some assassins, erasing a person's legacy could be the most satisfying part of their job. The removal of a person from history meant no one would ever be able to trace their actions. No one would remember their crimes or their successes. It was a form of power that went beyond the physical. It was psychological warfare. For others, though, it was a troubling act, one that blurred the lines between right and wrong, between justice and vengeance. It was one thing to kill someone in the heat of a mission, but another to ensure they never existed at all. In a world where legacy was everything, the act of erasure was not to be taken lightly. Kings, rulers, and nobles built their names upon a history that would be remembered for generations. Assassins, in contrast, erase the very possibility of a future. Imagine that kind of power. To write someone out of existence, to make them a ghost that would never walk among the living again. But with that power came a burden, because once you've erased someone, who's to say your own name won't one day be erased too? For the assassin, this was always lurking in the back of your mind. The job might be finished, the target gone, but the fear of erasure remained. Your actions were always hidden in shadows, and just as easily as you could take a life, a person could try to take yours, erasing your legacy as if you had never existed. It's a fragile existence when your very identity is one that thrives in secrecy. It's an endless game of cat and mouse, with your name, your reputation, hanging by a thread. As you continue on in the assassin's world, it becomes apparent that even more than the fear of death, you're constantly battling with the unknowns of your own survival. The question is no longer just about who you're going to kill next. It's about how you're going to remain unseen. The reality of being an assassin, particularly during medieval times, isn't just about execution. It's about keeping your head down, blending into a world that's as dangerous as the job you've chosen. When we think of assassins, we often picture them striking in the dead of night, silently slipping away after executing their target. And while this image isn't too far from the truth, what's not always depicted is the day-to-day struggle to stay hidden in plain sight, to exist in a world where every movement could give you away, every glance from the wrong person could mean your death, and every interaction is a risk. That was the true battle of being an assassin, existing among people, but never truly being a part of them. You learned to move through crowds without drawing attention, to make yourself small in the vast world around you. This wasn't about being the strongest or the bravest. It was about being the least noticeable. If you were noticed, it meant trouble. The very nature of your profession meant that you were forever on the edge, constantly aware of your surroundings, constantly on alert. Every whisper, every sudden movement, every shift in the crowd could signal your end. It was a kind of life that never allowed you to truly rest. The anxiety of being found out gnawed at you day and night, so much so that it became your constant companion. Historians still debate how successful medieval assassins were at hiding in plain sight. Some suggest that the culture of secrecy was so ingrained in medieval society that hiding in the shadows was almost second nature for an assassin. Others believe that the constant stress of living under such conditions, was too much for most individuals to endure long term. It's one thing to execute a target, but it's another thing entirely to maintain your invisibility for years on end. Constantly living a life of isolation, paranoia, and fear. This tension between being an unseen presence and the temptation to be known, it's what drives the assassin to be both skilled and cold, to excel in the art of killing, but also in the art of living quietly. You were a ghost, slipping through the cracks of the world, leaving no mark, no trace, except for the occasional, brief moment of violence. But even in those moments, you had to remain invisible. No one could know you had struck. No one could even know you existed. The reality of your life, therefore, was a mix of power and fear, a constant dance between survival and the pressure of being lost to history. You didn't live in the moment. You lived in the shadow of what might happen next. And with every mission you took, with every life you ended, that shadow loomed larger, ready to envelop you. The question wasn't just about how long you could hide. It was about whether you could ever escape the fear of being discovered. Now that you've spent time in the shadows, perfected the art of blending into crowds, and learned how to become invisible, let's talk about the more personal side of being an assassin. There's something to be said about the toll this lifestyle takes on you mentally and emotionally. The constant need for secrecy, the endless fear of betrayal, and the psychological weight of every kill. None of it is without consequence. And yet, amidst all of this, there's a strange sort of camaraderie that develops between you and your fellow assassins. You're all in this together, after all, bound by the same code, the same fears, and the same duty to a guild or master. But how do you deal with the emotional isolation? How do you cope when you spend your days hiding your true identity, living in a world where trust is a commodity you can't afford? The truth is, you don't. You don't trust anyone, not even the people you work with. Paranoia becomes second nature. Even your closest allies can turn on you when the price is right. And the thought of betrayal is always there, lurking in the background. So, you learn to compartmentalize. You learn to switch off your emotions when you need to. You become numb to the violence, to the fear, and to the loneliness that comes with the job. Historians still argue whether this emotional detachment is a necessary survival tactic or if it simply makes an assassin more dangerous to themselves and others. Some say that it's a coping mechanism, a way to survive in a profession where empathy could get you killed. Others believe that this emotional disconnect ultimately erodes the assassin's humanity, leaving them as nothing more than cold, calculating killers who can no longer feel anything. The truth is probably somewhere in between. The assassin is both a tool of the powerful and a victim of their own role in the world. You're not just a murderer. You're a person who has been forced to abandon any sense of normalcy to survive. And then there's the question of how you deal with the moral weight of what you do. Each kill is a decision. Sometimes it's a matter of survival. But other times, it's more complex. You could be killing a tyrant, someone who has caused suffering and pain to countless people. And in that moment, it feels justified. But then you think about the families left behind, the lives upended, and the consequences of your actions. Was this really the right thing to do? Was it justified? Could you live with the blood on your hands, or with the fear of your own death one day? Whether by betrayal or by a fellow assassin, make it all seem worth it. These questions are always there, whether you're acting as a hero or simply as a tool of power. The moral ambiguity of your life as an assassin is one of the most difficult aspects of the job. In the end, you're left with this strange mixture of power and guilt, of fear and numbness. And that's what makes the assassin's life so complicated. You live on the edge, always walking the fine line between success and failure, loyalty and betrayal. You've given up your humanity to survive. But what's left when the mission is over and you're left with only the silence of the night and the weight of your decisions? The life of an assassin, as you've come to realize, isn't just about navigating your own moral compass or surviving your next mission. There's also the very real, physical toll it takes on you. Imagine the constant tension in your muscles as you prepare to strike, the sweat on your brow as you hold your breath and steady your hand before taking the life of another. The act of assassination may only take a few seconds, but the preparation for it is long and grueling. The body is put through stress after stress, endless training, sleepless nights, hours spent tracking and following your target, and the physical strain of carrying weapons and armor while being stealthy enough to go unnoticed. You are constantly testing your limits, and over time, that takes a toll. The scars, both physical and mental, are inevitable. You learn to deal with the aches and pains that come with being constantly on alert. But there's more to it than just the physical strain of being an assassin. There's also the way your body reacts to the violence itself. You've been taught to stay calm, to never hesitate. But the adrenaline rush after every kill is undeniable. Your heart pounds, your hands shake, and your mind races with the knowledge that you've just altered the course of someone's life. Forever. It's a feeling that you might try to suppress, but it doesn't go away. The more you kill, the more you become desensitized to it. But never fully. Historians still argue about the psychological effects of a life filled with violence. Some say that constant exposure to death leaves an assassin emotionally numb, making them unable to connect with anyone or feel any true empathy. Others believe that it slowly erodes their sanity, leading to a constant sense of paranoia, where the assassin can no longer trust even themselves. There are cases of assassins spiraling into madness, haunted by the ghosts of their victims, seeing their faces in every shadow, hearing their voices in every empty space. It's no wonder that many assassins never live long lives. They burn bright, but they burn out quickly. What's most chilling, however, is that you've come to realize that this life, with all its pain, fear, and violence, is all you really know. You've made it your reality, and your reality has no room for the things that make people feel human. Emotions like love, compassion, or even simple joy have no place in your world. You can't afford them. If you start caring about people, if you start feeling things that aren't related to your mission, you'll lose focus and you'll be killed. The price of survival, it turns out, is a life devoid of connection. And yet, even in the midst of all this, you may wonder if there's more to life than just killing. After so many years of darkness, of being hidden behind masks and false identities, can you even remember who you were before you became an assassin? Is there a way to return to a life outside the shadows? Or have you sealed your fate forever? These questions plague your mind. But there's no time to dwell on them. The mission always comes first, and the next target is already waiting for you. The question of whether you can ever escape is one that you can't afford to ask. As the days blend into one another, you begin to realize that being an assassin isn't just about completing the mission and surviving. It's about the deeper psychological war that you're waging with yourself every single day. The burden of constantly living in a world of shadows, where trust is a foreign concept, begins to wear on your spirit. Every interaction is a calculated risk. Every word weighed for the potential of betrayal. You've long learned to keep your emotions in check, but it doesn't come without cost. The isolation becomes suffocating. You may find yourself yearning for something, anything, that could break the monotony of death and secrecy. But in the assassin's world, there's no room for such luxuries. You're trained to be alone, to be detached, and above all, to never form attachments. The job isn't just about executing a mission, it's about the never-ending mental gymnastics of staying ahead of the game. You've become a master at manipulation and deception, not just in your work, but in your daily life. You lie to yourself as much as you lie to others. You tell yourself that you're doing this for a higher cause, whether that cause is money, power, or even an idealistic sense of justice. But deep down, you know the truth. You're a tool used by those who have the power to bend you to their will. The very people who pay you to do their dirty work would just as quickly dispose of you if it meant securing their own interests. And so, you live in constant fear of betrayal, fear that the very people you trust, the very people who are supposed to have your back, will be the ones who turn on you when it suits their needs. Historians still debate whether the assassin's code was driven more by a sense of duty or by the overwhelming fear of being discarded when no longer useful. Some suggest that the guilds created a sense of brotherhood and honor among their members, that assassins were bound by an unspoken bond of loyalty and solidarity. Others argue that this supposed brotherhood was simply a convenient lie, an illusion created to keep the assassins working and to suppress the growing paranoia that came from being part of such a deadly, high-stakes profession. Whatever the truth, one thing is clear. Even when you were part of a guild, you were always alone in the end. It's at this point that the consequences of your profession hit you the hardest. The weight of your actions, the lives you've taken, the families you've torn apart, starts to feel unbearable. You start to question whether all of it was worth it. The gold, the power, the fleeting moments of triumph. Are they really enough to justify the lives you've destroyed along the way? The quiet moments between assignments, when you allow yourself to think, become filled with the ghosts of your past. The faces of your victims start to haunt you. Even when you're awake, their eyes follow you. And no matter how much you try to numb the guilt, it persists. You may even begin to wonder if you're losing yourself in this world of bloodshed and shadows. Every assassin has their breaking point, and for many, it comes when they can no longer tell whether they're still human, or if they've become just another killer. Is there a way out of this life? Can you walk away from it all, or is this path one you must walk until your death? These questions never leave you, but the answer is always the same. Survival. You kill, you hide, you survive. The days pass by in a haze of secrecy, fear, and calculated actions. And you begin to understand that the real power of an assassin is not just in the kills, but in the ability to remain invisible in a world where you're never truly safe. You are constantly on the move, perpetually shifting between identities, slipping from one mask to another, until even you might forget who you truly are beneath all the layers of deception. The very nature of your existence is based on your ability to remain unknown, unseen, to blend in so perfectly with your surroundings that your presence goes unnoticed. To the outside world, you are a ghost, a figure cloaked in secrecy, one whose existence is barely acknowledged until it's too late. But there's a paradox here. The more successful you are, the more feared you become, and yet, the more dangerous your life gets. As your reputation grows, so does the number of enemies you make. The more you take down, the more people want you gone. You might have been hired to kill kings, generals, or nobles, but with each success, you've painted a target on your own back. You start to realize that the greatest danger to an assassin isn't always the job itself, but the inevitable consequence of becoming too well known. The more you kill, the more you are remembered, and in a profession like yours, the memory of your name is more deadly than any blade. Historians still argue about the fate of assassins once they reach the pinnacle of their profession. Some suggest that the most successful assassins were eventually eliminated by those they had served, once they were no longer useful. Others believe that the most skilled assassins earned enough respect or fear that they were able to carve out a permanent place for themselves in the world, beyond the guilds and the shadows. Whether through a well-timed disappearance, a retreat to a far-off land, or a carefully orchestrated escape. These elite assassins may have lived out the rest of their days in relative peace. But the reality for most was far grimmer. With success came a rise in expectations. You were expected to do more, take on harder jobs, and always stay one step ahead of those who sought to control you. You could never afford a moment of weakness, a lapse in judgment. The world you inhabited was one of constant danger. And even if you somehow survived the perils of assassination, the emotional toll would wear you down. You would find yourself living in a constant state of hyper-awareness, always thinking 2 or 3 steps ahead, always scanning the shadows for a sign that someone is coming for you. Your reputation, which once worked to your advantage, now becomes a weight around your neck. People hear your name, and fear sets in. Your fame grows, but so does your isolation. You can no longer afford the luxury of friendships, family, or any true connections. To trust someone, anyone, is a death sentence. Every ally could turn on you. Every moment of kindness could be a trap. And so, you live alone, isolated in the cold, ever vigilant, but forever alone. The assassin's life isn't a glamorous one. It's a life of sacrifice. You give up everything in order to survive, and in doing so, you'll lose your humanity piece by piece. You may accomplish great things, change the course of history, but at what cost? You realize that the act of killing, once a means of survival, has become a prison in itself. Every mission is a step closer to your own personal demise, whether it comes from the guilt of your actions or the fear that one day someone will come for you. The silence after a kill is deafening, and it leaves you wondering if there will ever be an escape from the life you've chosen. But there's no time for answers. You must continue, because as long as you're alive, the game never ends. By now, you've become a master of the assassin's life. The cloak of secrecy, the cold detachment, the calculated moves, and the unbearable isolation. But now comes the true test. Living with the consequences. You've killed, you've hidden in the shadows, and you've survived. But how do you live with what you've become? The weight of the past is always there, creeping up behind you, haunting you long after the job is done. Every kill, every person you've silenced, every life you've ended. These moments don't fade away with time. They build up, layering upon one another until they form a heavy burden that you carry, whether you want to or not. The question you ask yourself, and it's a question every assassin faces at some point, is this: what do you do when you can no longer ignore the weight of your actions? How do you live in a world that you've shaped through violence, secrecy, and fear? Do you even want to escape? Or have you become so numb to your own existence that you've accepted this life as your fate? For many assassins, this moment comes when they can no longer reconcile who they've become with the person they once were, or thought they could be. You might start to wonder if there was ever a choice, if you were simply doomed to this life from the start. The world of assassination isn't one you step into willingly. It's one that traps you, molds you, and consumes you until there's nothing left but a shadow of the person who once existed. You were just a pawn in a larger game. And now, like a cracked mirror, you can no longer see the reflection of the person you used to be. Historians often debate the end of the assassin's journey. Some suggest that the most infamous assassins, those who shaped the course of history, ended up living quietly in exile, having earned enough wealth or respect to fade into the background. Others argue that most assassins meet violent, often ignominious ends, unable to escape the life they've built for themselves. The common thread is always the same, though whether through guilt, betrayal, or just the sheer exhaustion of a life spent in the shadows, there's no peaceful ending to an assassin's life. And then there's the haunting question that plagues every assassin's mind. What happens when it all ends? After years of living in the dark, of killing without remorse, of sacrificing your humanity for survival, can you ever truly leave that life behind? The ghosts of your past are never too far away, and no matter how much you might want to disappear into obscurity, your legacy as an assassin will follow you until your last breath. There is no escape from what you've become, no hiding from the weight of the choices you've made. In the quiet moments after each job, you might think about the possibility of redemption. Is there a way out? Can you ever return to a life that isn't tainted by the blood you've spilled? Or is your fate sealed, tied forever to the shadows you once inhabited? These questions remain unanswered, lingering like the shadows you once embraced. The truth, though, is that you've spent so long living in the darkness that you've forgotten what it's like to walk in the light. The silence, the loneliness, the ever-present fear. These are the things that define your world now. And they may be the only things left when the last job is done. And so, as you continue on your journey, remember that the path of an assassin is never truly over. Even when you think you've reached the end, the ghosts of your past will continue to haunt you. The world of assassins is a cruel, unforgiving one. You might survive the kills, but you'll never escape the consequences. In the end, you realize that the greatest weapon an assassin has is not their skill with a blade, but their ability to live with the weight of their actions, and the question of whether they can ever truly be free of it. You've spent years honing your skills, training in secrecy, and perfecting the art of striking without being seen. Being an assassin isn't just about brute force. It's about blending into your surroundings, becoming part of the shadows, and making yourself invisible to the world. The first lesson you learn is this: a true assassin isn't seen until it's too late. Every step you take must be deliberate, quiet, calculated. The faintest sound, a footstep on a loose stone or the rustle of fabric, could give you away. You must be as silent as the night itself. To accomplish this, you're trained in a variety of techniques, moving without making a sound, controlling your breathing, and using your environment to your advantage. The art of being unnoticed isn't just about stealth. It's about understanding the world around you, becoming part of it. You learn how to observe people without being seen, how to disappear into a crowd, how to move through darkness without leaving a trace. Whether it's slipping through narrow alleyways or blending in with the shadows of a crowded tavern, you become a master of concealment. Every environment is a potential weapon, and you're the one who knows how to use it. Historians still debate the true skill of medieval assassins in terms of stealth. Some argue that the assassin's ability to blend into their surroundings and escape without detection was the result of years of specialized training. Others suggest that it was less about specific techniques and more about an assassin's ability to exploit the weaknesses of their surroundings. Whatever the method, the result was always the same. You moved like a shadow, and the world was none the wiser. This quietness, this ability to disappear into the fabric of life, becomes your greatest asset. But with it comes a strange power. People fear what they cannot see, what they do not understand. As you walk through the world unnoticed, you also become something more than human in their eyes. An almost mythical figure, a force that strikes from nowhere. This power is intoxicating, but it also comes with a cost. The more silent you become, the more isolated you are from the world around you. The very skill that keeps you alive also keeps you from connecting with others. As an assassin, the physical challenges of your work are only part of the story. The true burden is the psychological toll that comes with it. The constant fear, the isolation, and the weight of your actions. The more you kill, the more you're forced to compartmentalize your emotions, to shut off any sense of guilt, or remorse that might creep in. But even the most hardened assassin has a breaking point. Imagine the relentless mental strain of living in the shadows, of never being able to let your guard down, of knowing that at any moment, someone might turn against you, or your next target might be someone you once admired. It eats at you, slowly, quietly, until you start questioning everything. What have you become? Who were you before you took your first life as an assassin? You've seen the worst of humanity, the deceit, the violence, the betrayal. But it's hard not to wonder if you've become just another part of that darkness. Historians still debate whether the assassin's lifestyle led to long-term mental health issues. But many agree that it was a brutal existence. Paranoia, anxiety, and depression were common among those who lived in constant fear of discovery or betrayal. In a world where you can trust no one, the psychological effects of isolation and fear are undeniable. You're always on edge, always prepared for the worst. And that takes a toll on your mind. Your thoughts become fragmented. One moment, you might question your purpose, and the next, you're numb, simply going through the motions. But even worse than the constant stress is the internal conflict. How do you reconcile your actions with your own morals? Is it ever truly justifiable to take someone's life, regardless of who they are or what they've done? The more you kill, the harder it becomes to differentiate between right and wrong. You begin to wonder if the lines you once believed in were just constructs, a way to justify your own actions. It's a life filled with contradictions. On one hand, you are a tool of power, a force that can change the course of history with a single strike. On the other, you are a broken soul, trapped in a world of violence and fear. And all the while, the ghosts of your past haunt you, their faces haunting your every step, your every decision. The world of assassins is not just a collection of solitary killers, it's a network, a system bound together by strict codes, alliances, and unwritten rules. When you first enter the assassin's world, it's not as a lone wolf, but as part of something much larger, a guild. These organizations are built on trust, loyalty, and above all, the understanding that each member must put the guild's mission above all else. You're not just a hired killer. You're a cog in a machine designed to change the course of history. The code that governs the guilds is clear. Loyalty is paramount. But loyalty to whom is it? To the guild itself, to the leaders who guide you, or to the mission that you're hired to carry out? The answer isn't always straightforward. As an assassin, you quickly learn that your loyalties will be tested, and what you thought was a unified organization can be divided by personal ambition, jealousy, and betrayal. The assassin's world is one where alliances shift as easily as the wind. and it's all too easy to find yourself at odds with those you once considered allies. You're trained to kill with precision, to blend into the shadows. But you're also trained to obey the guild's rules, even when it feels like those rules are at odds with your own survival instincts. The guilds aren't just about murder. They're about power. And power, as you've learned, is something that corrupts. What you once believed to be a righteous cause, the elimination of tyrants, the enforcement of balance, begins to blur. The people you're hired to kill, the targets you're ordered to take down, no longer seem so different from you. You start questioning the very reasons behind your actions. Are you really a hero, or just another tool used by those in power? Historians still argue about the true nature of assassin guilds. Some suggest they were part of larger political movements, working to bring about change. Whether through the assassination of corrupt rulers, or through the manipulation of the course of history. Others argue that these guilds were nothing more than organized crime syndicates, interested only in power, wealth, and maintaining control. Regardless of their true nature, one thing is clear. Guilds were crucial to the assassin's existence. Without them, you would have been nothing more than a hired killer, struggling to survive in a world filled with betrayal and bloodshed. But even within these guilds, there is no guarantee of safety. Trust is a fragile thing. And while the code may bind you, it also keeps you in constant fear of the day when your loyalty might be questioned. As long as you follow the rules, you're protected. But if you step out of line, if you show weakness, if you make an enemy of the wrong person, you'll find yourself marked for death. Even the strongest assassin is never truly safe within the walls of their own guild. When you think of an assassin, the first thing that likely comes to mind is a dagger, sleek, sharp, and lethal. But the truth is, the tools of an assassin's trade are far more varied and creative than just a simple weapon. You learn to use anything and everything to your advantage. Poisons, ropes, hidden blades, and even the environment around you. Each weapon has its purpose. And an assassin's true skill isn't in their ability to wield a dagger, but in their ability to choose the right tool for the job. Your training begins with the basics: knives and swords. These are the most common weapons, but they are far from the only tools you'll use. You quickly realize that stealth and efficiency are more important than brute strength. A small, easily concealed knife might serve you better than a large sword. The goal isn't to fight an opponent head-on, but to strike quickly and silently. To catch your target off guard before they even know what hit them. Your blades are sharp, but your mind is sharper. You've learned that the ability to outthink your enemy is just as important as the ability to outfight them. Then there's the use of poisons, which quickly becomes one of the most effective weapons in your arsenal. Poisons allow you to take down a target without leaving a trace, without ever needing to draw blood. You can use it in food, on weapons, or even in the air. There's no limit to the ways you can introduce a deadly toxin. You learn the subtleties of each poison, understanding how to use them for maximum effect. Some poisons act slowly, while others can kill in mere minutes. Knowing which poison to use for each job becomes an art form. But, as with everything, there's a catch. Poisons are tricky, and if you're not careful, you could end up poisoning yourself instead. Ropes, garrots, and strangulation tools also come into play. In some cases, an assassin's job requires discretion and a quick, quiet kill. You learn how to use a rope to strangle your target in a way that leaves no evidence, making it impossible for anyone to know what happened. Sometimes, the simplest tools are the most effective. And you begin to understand that a well-placed rope can do what a dagger can't. Historians still argue whether medieval assassins were truly the masters of these varied tools, or if they were simply opportunistic killers who used whatever they had at their disposal. Some claim that assassins were trained in a wide array of techniques and tools, becoming experts in the art of subtlety and silent killing. Others suggest that many of these tools were just as likely to be used by thieves or common criminals, and that assassins were often just street-level killers with no special training at all. Whatever the truth may be, one thing is certain. The tools at your disposal are as much a part of your identity as your training, your secrecy, and your reputation. But the most dangerous weapon in your arsenal, the one that no one ever expects, is your mind. You've learned to manipulate situations, to deceive, to lie, and to plant ideas in the minds of your enemies. The greatest assassins are not just those who kill the fastest or the most efficiently. They are those who know how to create the perfect environment for a kill to happen. They control the narrative. They set the stage, and they strike when the time is right. In the world of medieval assassins, reputation is everything. It's not just about the jobs you complete, the targets you eliminate, or the tools you use. It's about the fear you strike into the hearts of those who hear your name. The most effective assassin isn't just the one who can kill quickly. It's the one who can make others fear them long before they even raise a blade. Fear is a weapon that strikes deeper than steel. It leaves a scar on the mind that no sword could ever replicate. When your reputation is built, you don't need to be physically present to wield power. You don't even need to strike at all. The mere whisper of your name is enough to send chills down the spine of a ruler, a noble, or an enemy. The fear that you could be anywhere, watching, waiting for the perfect moment, becomes more powerful than any direct confrontation. You are everywhere and nowhere. You are both invisible and omnipresent. Your name tied to death and danger, and that's what makes you effective. You don't just kill your target. You kill their sense of security. The realization that you could strike at any time, that they could never feel safe, turns your target into a prisoner of their own fear. Historians still debate the impact of fear-based tactics in the medieval world. Some claim that the mere idea of an assassin's reputation was enough to disarm enemies and prevent confrontations. A whispered rumor of your skills could render a well-guarded castle or fortress useless, as the mere knowledge that you could enter without detection created more chaos than an army of soldiers ever could. Others argue that while fear may have been effective in certain circumstances, it was ultimately your actions, your ability to kill without detection, that kept your reputation alive. Fear might paralyze an opponent, but only a true assassin can deliver the blow. The paradox of fear is that while it gives you power, it also isolates you. The more feared you become, the less human you seem to others. The world begins to view you as something less than a person and more like a shadow, an idea, or a myth. People speak of you in whispers, telling stories of your silent killings, your impossible feats. You become a legend. But legends are not human. You are no longer part of the world you once knew. You are a ghost, and ghosts do not have friends. The toll this takes on your psyche is significant. Fear might protect you, but it's also a prison. You can never relax, never trust, never form bonds. As your reputation grows, you become more isolated, surrounded by the very people who fear you. You are both feared and alone. The paradox of your existence is that while you are respected, perhaps even revered, by those in power, you are also a prisoner of your own making. Your success comes at the expense of your humanity. But this fear is also your shield. In a world where death lurks at every corner and betrayal is inevitable, the only thing that keeps you alive is the ability to make others fear you. Without it, you would be just another target, another name on the list of assassins who failed. It's this reputation, built on fear and bloodshed, that ensures your survival. In the world of assassins, trust is a luxury you can't afford. Even within the guilds, loyalty is always in question. Betrayal, whether within the shadows of your own organization or at the hands of your enemies, is a constant threat. As you move deeper into the assassin's life, you realize that your existence is a precarious balancing act, always one misstep away from falling into a pit of betrayal that could be your undoing. It's not just your targets you need to worry about. It's everyone around you. In a profession where secrecy is paramount and power is gained by eliminating those who stand in your way, you learn that no one is truly safe from betrayal, not even your fellow assassins. Every decision you make is tinged with the possibility that someone you trust might be waiting for the perfect moment to turn on you. The worst part of this life is that betrayal comes from the most unexpected places. Your closest ally could easily be the one who seeks your downfall, lured by promises of a higher position, more power, or the fear that you've outlived your usefulness. Even the slightest sign of weakness, an unguarded word, a mistake made during a mission, or even a perceived slight, could lead to your betrayal. In a world built on deceit, it's impossible to know who your true allies are. Every interaction is a calculated risk. Historians often discuss whether betrayal was an inherent part of the assassin's lifestyle or a consequence of the larger political game that assassins were often involved in. Some believe that the very nature of guilds created a toxic atmosphere of rivalry and power struggles, where betrayal was inevitable. Others argue that the assassin's code, though strict, maintained a sense of honor among members, and it was only the corrupting influence of money and power that led to betrayal. Either way, the result is the same. Betrayal is an ever-present threat, and every assassin must learn to live with it. But betrayal isn't just about being deceived. It's about your ability to betray others before they have the chance to betray you. The assassin's life teaches you to be merciless when it comes to survival. Loyalty to the guild and to your comrades is necessary. But loyalty to yourself is paramount. If you hesitate, if you let your guard down, it could cost you everything. To survive, you must constantly anticipate the possibility that someone will try to eliminate you. And that means you must be prepared to strike first, even if it means betraying someone who might once have been your closest ally. And so, you become increasingly paranoid. Everyone is a potential threat. Every conversation is laced with hidden meanings. Every friendly gesture could be a trap. In time, you trust no one, not even yourself. Your entire existence is defined by this suspicion. You become a shadow, a figure defined not by who you are, but by what you are capable of doing. The life of betrayal erodes your humanity, piece by piece, until you're no longer sure if you're the assassin or the one being hunted. As you rise through the ranks and prove your worth, the jobs become more intricate, more dangerous, and more morally complex. The final job is always looming, a test of everything you've learned. A mission that will define your legacy or bring about your downfall. You're no longer just an anonymous figure in the shadows. You're a name that commands attention, a reputation that precedes you. The stakes are higher, the risks greater, and the pressure immense. The final job is always the one that pushes you to your limits. The one that forces you to question everything you've done and everything you've become. But this job is different. You can feel it in the air, like a storm on the horizon. Something that will either make you immortal or destroy you completely. This job is more than just another kill. It's a turning point. A moment where everything you've worked for could either be realized or unraveled. The target might be a ruler with the power to change the course of history. Or perhaps a rival assassin. Someone who has become a threat to the guild and must be silenced. Regardless of the specifics, one thing is certain. This will be the job that either solidifies your place in the assassin's world or marks your final exit from it. Historians still argue whether the final job for an assassin was truly a test of skill or a means of removing those who had outlived their usefulness. Some believe that the most skilled assassins were sent on these high-profile missions, chosen for their experience and ability to execute under pressure. Others suggest that it was a way to control the growing threat of powerful assassins who might become too influential or too dangerous to leave alive. Regardless of the reasoning, the final job is a defining moment for every assassin. It's the one mission where failure means more than just death. It means the end of your legacy. With everything on the line, you prepare for the job as if your very life depends on it. Because it does. Every movement, every strategy, every decision must be flawless. You can't afford any mistakes. There's no room for hesitation. The fear that gripped you when you first became an assassin has grown into something else now. An icy, controlled determination. You've done this before, but never like this. This mission will require everything you have, every ounce of skill, every ounce of cunning. But as you step into the shadows, preparing to execute your final mission, you realize that the assassin's life is never truly over. Whether you succeed or fail, you will always be remembered as part of a world that is just as deadly and unpredictable as the one you've spent your life navigating. In the end, your final job isn't about the target. It's about who you've become, the legacy you've built, and the consequences of living a life in the shadows. Once the final job is complete, you stand at the crossroads between two worlds. The mission is done, and whether successful or not, you realize that you've crossed a line from which there is no return. In the assassin's world, there is no retirement, no quiet life waiting for you. Your legacy is written in blood, and the story of your life is marked by every job, every betrayal, every life you've taken. It's impossible to escape the path you've chosen. The question that lingers is, what does your legacy truly mean? For some, the legacy of an assassin is a tale of triumph, of achieving something so significant, so earth-shattering, that it changes the course of history. Your name is whispered in the halls of power, and your enemies remember you with fear and respect. You become a figure in the shadows, your reputation living on long after your death. But for others, the legacy is one of tragedy, a life spent in the darkness, slowly losing their humanity, haunted by the ghosts of their victims and the choices they made. Historians often debate the true nature of the assassin's legacy. Some view them as agents of justice, fighting for a cause larger than themselves. Perhaps, they argue, assassins were simply soldiers of a silent war, fighting battles that could not be won in the light of day. Others see assassins as nothing more than tools of power, mercenaries who did the dirty work of the powerful and then faded into obscurity. In the end, the truth is far more complex. The assassin's legacy is not defined by a singular act, but by the accumulation of every kill, every betrayal, every life taken, and every moment of isolation. As you live out your days, you begin to understand the true cost of your work. The jobs may have ended, but the isolation, the paranoia, and the fear don't fade. You may have survived the final job, but what happens after the work is done? The assassin is never free. No matter how many years pass, the weight of the past clings to you. The fear that you've made too many enemies to ever truly be safe. The guilt of those you've killed, the regret of the people you've betrayed, these are the chains that bind you. And then, there's the haunting question. Can a legacy like yours ever be erased? As you fade into obscurity, you wonder if you'll ever be truly forgotten. Can the assassin's shadow ever be lifted, no matter how much time passes? You know that your legacy will always be written in the dark corners of history, where your name will live on in whispers, in stories, and in the fearful memories of those who crossed your path. For better or for worse, the life of an assassin is a legacy that is inescapable. It shapes everything you've done, every decision you've made, and it will follow you to the end. Even in death, the shadow of the assassin lives on. As you sit in the stillness, you realize that the assassin's life is a never-ending cycle of fear, survival, and secrecy. The jobs you've completed, the lives you've taken, the countless nights spent in hiding, they're all behind you now. But the echoes still linger in the silence. The path you've walked is long and winding, marked by shadows, betrayal, and the constant weight of your choices. And now, as you face the end of this journey, you realize that you've become a ghost, fading into the very darkness you once thrived in. The assassin's life isn't one of glory. It's one of sacrifice, of giving up everything for the sake of survival. The family you never had, the friendships you never formed, the life you could have lived. All of it was traded for the chance to keep breathing, to keep moving forward in a world that only valued what you could do, not who you were. But as the years pass, you start to wonder if it was worth it. Was the price of survival too high? Could you ever reclaim a piece of the life you lost along the way? In the end, the assassin's path leads to one undeniable truth. There is no escape. The shadow you've created for yourself is as much a part of you as the blade you wielded. And even if you walk away from the guild, even if you fade into obscurity, you can never truly escape what you've become. The whispers of your past will follow you. And in those quiet moments, you'll remember the choices you made, the path you took, and the legacy that will never be erased. Now, as the world fades to black, you finally rest, quiet, still, and alone, but at peace. The journey is over. Sweet dreams.